Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I am your host, family law attorney Henry Gornbein. I am a partner in the Birmingham full-service law firm of Lippitt O'Keefe Gornbein. The concept for this show is to analyze and look at issues that we all face as we hopefully gracefully gray, looking at issues from legal, economic, and medical perspectives. Today on Gracefully Graying, I am pleased to welcome as my guest attorney and tax specialist Stephen Weisberg. Stephen, welcome to Gracefully Graying.
Thank you, Henry. I appreciate it.
Well, first of all, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about your background and who you are?
I am an attorney. I spent some time, about 5 years, doing corporate bankruptcy. And at some point, I decided that I felt like I was working so that I could get paid, and no one else was getting paid. The creditors weren't getting money out of the bankruptcies. It seemed like we were working for the three big car companies, and no one else was really getting paid anything. And while it's nice to get paid yourself, I felt like there was a way that I could make a bigger impact elsewhere. So I ultimately. I had a friend that I worked with. He was in a business where he was helping taxpayers with IRS issues, and I kind of just jumped in feet first and went in and wanted to try to see if this could work. This is something I could do by myself. This is something that I could help people on a consistent basis, and there were people who really needed my help.
And you're doing it, and you're becoming very successful, which is a good thing.
Right.
Why don't you tell us exactly what you do, kind of basic for our viewers?
So I represent individual taxpayers as well as businesses that owe taxes, and as well as the owners of the businesses who owe taxes. These are delinquent taxes usually that they owe to the IRS and the state as well. And I help them negotiate resolutions to the tax issues and the tax problems that they've run into. Whereas otherwise, the IRS, who has unfettered power to do what they want, would probably take everything that these people had if they didn't have representation.
Stephen, what are the rights of an individual as a taxpayer?
Well, I mean, the rights, even the IRS has a taxpayer bill of rights, and so there's certain rights that the IRS wants to say that the taxpayer has. These include the right to privacy, the right to confidentiality, the right to finality, meaning at a certain point it's over, the tax issue is dealt with. They have a right to representation, a right to, a speedy solution to their case, a right to appeal. So there's about 10 of them. I could go on. These are all very good rights that the taxpayer does have. Now, if one of those rights are not taken seriously by the IRS, your options may be somewhat limited. And so, in theory, it's a very nice thing to have your taxpayer bill of rights there, but it still needs to be implemented. And that's one out of many reasons why you want to have a tax attorney, tax professional on your side, so that you aren't being bullied and not receiving the rights that you deserve.
Stephen, when should someone contact you for at least advice or legal assistance?
Yeah, so a lot of people wait until they receive a lien in the mail from the IRS. Some people don't even call when they receive a lien. They wait until they pick up their paycheck one Friday and all of it's gone, and then they call someone. You certainly can do that, but in my professional opinion, that's way too late to be calling if you have tax issues. You really should call. I would advise you call once you know you're going to have an outstanding balance, even if the IRS isn't even on you're not even on the IRS's radar, and the IRS doesn't even know that you're going to have a balance. Like, for instance, you're preparing your 2017 tax return, and you realize you're going to have a balance owed, but you're not going to be able to pay it. Right then is when you should call to see what options you have, how you can resolve the case, how you can make sure that you don't get in trouble with the IRS, how you can make sure you aren't paying outrageous penalties and fees, that's the best time to do it, being proactive and getting out in front of it as opposed to waiting until the last minute and then being behind the eight ball.
Stephen, let's say someone contacts you and says, I'm in trouble, I owe a lot in taxes. Why don't you tell our viewers the steps in the process from when you first either interview someone or review the paperwork and go from there?
Well, I don't know exactly what other firms do. My firm, what we do is we do an initial investigation for our taxpayers, for our taxpayer clients.
What does that mean?
There are a lot of companies in this industry, in the tax resolution industry, if you want to call it that, that have shown that they really aren't that worried about the taxpayer. They just want to get the money in the door. And they will sell taxpayers right off the bat and say, hey, I can get your debt down to 10% of what you owe. Just give me $12,000 right now. And people are afraid, and people don't know what to do, and they don't have any return, and taxpayers pay the money, and then they don't get what they've been promised. What we do is we do an investigation into their tax liability. We look at the IRS internal transcripts. We see if there's any tax returns that are missing. We see what kind of penalties are out there. We see if there's levies that might be coming down the pipe. We give the taxpayer a full understanding of what their tax situation is, which, number one, gives them some peace of mind so that they now understand. Because, the fear of the unknown is probably the biggest fear for anyone. But they now understand what their tax situation is. And at that point, we know what we can do to help them, or what we recommend that we would do to help them resolve these tax issues. So instead of not knowing anything about the case and saying, hey, we'll do this, X, Y, and Z for you, without even knowing whether we can even do it or not, and charging some large sum, we do an initial investigation beforehand, and then we come back with the recommendations once we have all the information, and once we know exactly what we can do, and then you hire us. Or you don't hire us, and you don't have to. Because even the investigation itself gives a lot of people some peace of mind.
How long does a typical investigation take?
The investigation can be very quick. It could take just a few days. It depends sometimes on the clients, because especially for self-employed taxpayers, which is a lot of our clients, we need profit and loss statements from them. We need to see what their financials are like. That's all part of the analysis that we go through to determine what solutions we would use to fix their tax problem. So it could take 3 days. If the client's dragging his or her feet, it could take longer. But it's a short process. We get it done quickly. We get you the information that you need quickly, and then we present it to you, and the taxpayer then makes the decision from there about how they would like to proceed.
Stephen, let's say you've done the investigation, you feel that there's something you can do to help. They then retain you. Take us through the next steps.
So the next steps after that is really, again, a lot of this lies at the feet of the taxpayer. We need certain documents. Well, first of all, let me just say this. If there are missing tax returns, those always have to be filed first. If they in 2014 they forgot to file a tax return, or didn't because there was some reason that they couldn't.
Is that common that people don't file their taxes?
Yes. A large percentage of the people that we help, we have to file tax returns for them before we can even get to the resolution part, because they have all these outstanding tax returns that were never filed.
Is there a penalty for failing to file?
Yeah, there's a penalty for failing to file, and there's a penalty for failing to pay. The penalty for failing to file is actually much higher than the penalty to pay. So this kind of brings me to another point is, people file extensions, right, if they don't have it done by April 15th. Well, the extension is an extension to file, but it's not an extension to pay. So you have to pay by April 15th no matter what, but you can file your tax return later by August 15th.
I think that's an important point.
Yeah,
because
a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, they feel, I'm taking an extension, I don't have to pay. So.
Right, exactly.
Is there statute of limitations with regard to taxes owed?
There is, and when we're talking about the IRS specifically, there is a 10-year statute of limitations by which the IRS has to collect from the taxpayer. Now, the 10 years is based on when the tax is assessed against the taxpayer. And there are certain circumstances in which that 10-year period will be told, will be put out further than just 10 years. You know, it might go to 11 years.
What would be the circumstances for our viewers?
If you file for bankruptcy, that pushes the statute of limitations back. If you file one of the resolutions that we may talk about here, if you file an offer in compromise, that pushes the statute of limitations back. Those are two of the main ones that really push it back. And then, you know, people have things on the books for, 15 years, and then they're saying, well, why? I thought it was only 10. Well, here's the reason. You did this, this, and this, and so it allows the statute of limitations to be farther out.
What if you make payments? Does that push the statute of limitations out further?
If you make payments,
within the 10 years, does that have any impact?
No. It's just 10 years. You can make payments anytime you want. They're happy to take your money.
Sure. So it doesn't toll it. Like
No.
in some areas, a payment will toll things.
No, they want your money.
Okay, you've gotten to the point where you've done research, you've been retained, you're filing missing tax returns. What's the next step once that's taken care of?
The next step, and it's actually a step that was probably happens somewhat concurrent with the tax preparation, is we have certain documents that we need from our clients in order to make sure that we're able to provide them with the most favorable settlement allowed under law. And those are basically financial documents. Those are documents that income documents, expenses, if you're a sole proprietor and self-employed, P&L for the business, profit and loss for the business, and we take a look at the overall financial situation. And based on that and the other circumstances that are surrounding, this specific case, we use all of that to our advantage, and we make sure that we're able to get the best possible outcome for our clients. The negotiation part with the IRS is almost the last part of what we do, because there's so much upfront work. You want to be prepared. You want to have everything at your disposal. You want to make sure that you know exactly what you have, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are in your case, and then you go to the negotiations at the end.
Okay, we've reached our first break point. We are going to be right back with my guest, tax attorney Stephen Weisberg, right after this break.
As a business owner, you're always looking to save money and cut costs where you can. And if you advertise on radio or television, you know it can get pretty pricey. If radio and TV aren't delivering like they promised, and you're looking for a more reasonably priced way to get your message to the masses, I've got an answer for you. New Radio Media. With live streaming and on-demand programming, your message can be seen throughout the day, and you can worry a little less about cutting those costs. For more information, go to newradiomedia.com or call Buzz Van Houten at 248-939-9999.
Tarno knows doors. We've got garage doors, entry doors, storm doors, custom doors. Tarno knows doors.
Plus, the latest LiftMaster garage door openers and the toughest retractable screens on the market, all by the push of a button. Tarno Doors is celebrating its 50th year anniversary and is the recipient of the 2016 Subcontractor of the Year from the Home Builders Association.
Tarno knows doors. Tarno knows doors.
Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm David.
Join us for fun and adventure on our new show, Podquesters, where we fight through imaginary battles and pray to the dice gods for good rolls.
Yes, it's an epic sweeping adventure. We try to fulfill our destinies without driving the Dungeon Master crazy.
I thought that was the point.
Anyways, check us out here on newradiomedia.com Fridays, Podquesters.
See you there.
Want to stay informed, entertained, and enlightened? Get connected and stay connected today to New Radio Media. The New Radio Media app is now available for download in the Apple and Google Play Store. Just search for NRM Streams for unlimited access to archived, live, new, exciting, and unique content
Welcome to Geektainment Weekly.
All for free. Do it now. Stay connected.
We are back on Gracefully Graying with my guest, tax attorney Stephen Weisberg. Stephen, before the break you were talking about basically the steps taken, and at what point do you start the negotiation with the IRS or an agent?
Yeah, the negotiations, like I said, start actually farther down the road than you might think, because like I said, we need to gather all the information, have all the arsenal at our disposal that we can use in order to make our case to the IRS. So there's different solutions that are available and different resolutions that are available to specific taxpayers depending on their circumstances and their financials and all of that. And so the different negotiations take place based upon the different resolutions that are available.
And what are some of the different resolutions that you offer as part of your services?
Yeah, well, there are an installment agreement where you'd pay the IRS over monthly over time. There's what's called a partial pay installment agreement where the taxpayer would only pay a small amount of money to the IRS each month, but because of that 10-year statute of limitations that we discussed, they would never pay off the total amount of the debt that they owe. So effectively, they're cutting a deal with the IRS. There is also what's called the currently non-collectible status, which
means what?
It's a temporary status, but basically it protects the taxpayer from any sort of enforced collections from the IRS. What you have to prove is that the taxpayer is basically underwater in terms of his or her income and expenses. And so more or less the IRS puts it aside and says, okay, we're not going to bother you, but we're going to review your file in the next year, and if you've won the lottery or something, we're going to pull you out of the currently non-collectible status, and we're going to go after you like we would have, previously.
Now, I was wondering, some people will come to you once they find a paycheck has been levied on or garnished. While you're researching the case and the initial steps, they're still subject to all these garnishments or, money being taken. So at what point can you say, hey, we're negotiating, how do we stop this?
Well, right. So in some respects, once the taxpayer has gotten that far down the road and their paycheck's being garnished or whatever, they have clearly put this to the side and not dealt with this.
Yeah, they're in deep trouble.
They're in trouble. So, what I can do from the beginning is discuss this with the IRS and say, hey, the taxpayer obviously is being garnished now. He or she cannot live this, continue to live this way. This is creating an economic hardship. I just got involved in the case. I would like to request an administrative hold on the account. And I might ask for 90 days. They usually don't give me 90 days, but even if they gave me 15 or 30 days, where they wouldn't move forward with any other enforced collections. So I can start there by putting an administrative hold on the account. But that obviously doesn't protect them forever. And in that time period is when we start really getting into it and gathering all the documents, talking to the clients about the different circumstances, talking to the clients about what they can afford, what assets they have, et cetera, et cetera. And once we have all that together, we present our argument to the IRS.
Now we're dealing with more and more people who are aging, and the demographics in this show are, people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, sometimes 80s. And is there a difference if you're negotiating for someone who's younger and can recoup versus someone who may either be limited because of Social Security or being close to retirement? Mm-hmm. What are some of the differences there, Stephen?
Yes. You mentioned two different things, which are both good things to talk about. One being if the taxpayer just is relying on Social Security at this point, and maybe they're older, they're probably not going to go out and get a job that's going to pay them, $1 million, right? So,
Right.
so the IRS does take that into consideration when you're speaking to them and negotiating with them and saying, look, this is what they have. They have Social Security. That's all they're really going to have moving forward. Take that into consideration while we discuss this, because there's no possibility of this taxpayer, making a ton of money in the future. You also mentioned another instance. So now I'm trying to remember what you said. But you said, do they take into account that the taxpayer might be retiring soon?
Exactly.
And they really don't, because the way that the negotiations work are the IRS looks at your current financial situation and the current income you're bringing in. So the ultimate resolution is based upon the current income that you have. Now, if you ultimately retire in 3 years, you can renegotiate that resolution to your tax issues, because now your income is so much lower, but not until you're actually retired.
Stephen, are there any tools or resources that are available for seniors that we should be cognizant of?
Yeah, I mean, I think that seniors are ripe for scams. Number one, they get phone calls all the time, and I'm sure probably a lot of people watching have
I've gotten them.
Yeah, and so have I. But it seems like seniors sometimes get very worried about it, and we get a lot of calls from our clients say, I just got a call from someone from the IRS, and they said I'm going to jail tomorrow. And I have to say, and it's not funny by any means, but they're not going to take you to jail. The IRS won't even call you, let alone call you to tell you that they're taking you to jail. So if you receive a call from the IRS and they say, we're going to put you in jail, or we're going to, do whatever we're going to do, it's a scam call. They're not going to call you. They're not going to email you. You should only speak to them through their priority hotlines, or if you have a direct number for a revenue officer, or have your tax professional, in my case a tax attorney, take over the case for you, so you don't have to deal with any of this stuff.
How do you deal with issues? Because I know often interest can rise up tremendously and penalties can be tremendous. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with some of these issues?
Penalties, yes, can be very high. There are ways to abate penalties under certain situations. One penalty abatement that's used quite frequently is called the first-time penalty abatement, meaning like you're almost kind of like a first-time offender. So like the earliest year that you owe, let's say you owe for 2013, 2012, and 2010. If you have penalties on 2010 year, and that was the first time you've owed to the IRS, and within the 3 years prior to that, you've had no issues, no penalties, you've been in compliance, you can then try to negotiate a first-time penalty abatement for that 1 year to get rid of the penalties for that first year. There are also reasonable cause penalty abatements as well. And those are much more defined, serious illness or death. If you had a fire in your business and all the records were gone, and you couldn't file your returns because of that, that would be another, reasonable cause penalty abatement. So there's things of that nature where there are ways to reduce the penalties.
File a joint return. There's one breadwinner in the family, and the breadwinner passes away or is incapacitated. Is the spouse liable?
If they were filing jointly, yeah, the spouse will be liable, yes.
When we started the show, we were talking about the fact that there are all these ads saying, or people will say, call me and I'm going to get a result that's 10 cents on a dollar,
right,
or 20 cents.
Right.
What are the realities? I mean, what is a reasonable expectation? Are there cases where you get payback of 10 cents on a dollar or 50 cents on, I mean, tell us about
right.
some of these situations.
Right, and this is a big issue, because you can't necessarily have reasonable expectations until the tax professional, the attorney, knows what, the facts and the circumstances surrounding the case. That's why it bothers me personally so much that there's all these tax firms out there who are saying we can do this, this, and this, and they're just making it up and charging people large amounts. how could they know what they could do for this taxpayer, and taxpayer who might be gracefully graying but is not totally familiar with how to get this tax issue resolved. They don't know where to turn, and they'll just pay them, the tax firm, and then maybe get what they were told, maybe not. But what we do is have that initial investigation. And so in certain instances, yes, of course, we've done 10 cents on the dollar, what's called offer and compromise. And that's what a lot of firms like to promote, is offer and compromise.
How does that work exactly?
The offer and compromise, first of all, is the best possible outcome for you if you are eligible for it. The problem is you have to be eligible for it. The offer and compromise is basically, and to make this simplistic, the offer and compromise is you make an offer to the IRS, and it's a formula. It's formulaic, so it's based upon your disposable income as determined by your income and then expenses and standards that the IRS uses. They take disposable income, multiplied that by 12, and then they add in any assets, equity and assets that you have, and that, like I said, simplistically, that is going to be the number that your offer will be. So, for instance, if someone's making, a small amount of money and they have 5 kids and they have no disposable income and they have no assets, while you're taking 0 disposable income, you're multiplying that by 12 because that's the formula, and you're adding in 0 in equity, which means that the offer theoretically could be 0. To the IRS. Now you can't offer 0, so you offer a couple $100 and you can get your entire debt wiped out.
Stephen, we're down to approximately a little over a minute. What are some final words of wisdom or thoughts that you'd like to share with us before we sign off on Gracefully Graying?
I would just say for the gracefully graying population, I do have a lot of clients that get into situations where they need my help in that population. Maybe they have had my high medical bills. Maybe they took money out of a 401k or some other retirement fund to pay for medical bills, and then they have another tax liability out there for them. And like I said, there's scams out there. There are a lot of ways where this population needs help from a tax professional. I personally would hire a tax attorney, but I might be biased. But make sure you are proactive about your tax debt and don't wait until the last minute.
So if there's a phone call, ignore it.
Yes.
If there's a letter, don't ignore it.
Exactly.
And call you, and the sooner the better, because you can be proactive. And I know a lot of people tend to bury their head in the sand,
Right.
And when you're dealing with the IRS, that is not a wise thing to do.
That is not a wise thing to do, correct.
So, Stephen Weisberg, we're out of time. I want to thank you for being my guest on Gracefully Graying. I want to thank you for watching Gracefully Graying.
What's going on in your neighborhood?
They say it takes a village.
It's the simple things.
The things that are a testament to the old.
And the things that are a testament to the new.
Know what's going on in your community.
Check out our community channel on newradiomedia.com.
Why are we here? What makes a person truly good? For those answers, you're going to have to take a philosophy class. But if you're more interested in who would win in a fight between R2-D2 and a Dalek, watch Get It to the Geeks on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. on newradiomedia.com.
This June, Fat Mike's Punk and Drublic Festival takes over Legend Valley Campground in Thornville, Ohio for 3 days of kick-ass punk rock, food, beer, and camping. Lineup includes NoFX, Rancid, Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, Pennywise, Money Money Boss Jones, and much, much more. In addition, there will be a craft beer tasting garden with over 200 craft beers, which includes local and national. Also, there will be stories from the road, including Fat Mike of NoFX, Keith Morris of Black Flag, and Jello Biafra. Tickets are on sale right now at punkandDrublicFest.com. We'll see you there.
Take it over. So take